Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. I'm Jack. He is Frank. Frankie, we got a little Bears news, a little Bears news, not something big, but people. I think something that could have made this offseason a little bit more enjoyable to talk about. The fact that the Bears are no longer in the running for Hard Knocks. Frankie, I as someone who's never seen Hard Knocks, an episode, I've never seen anything to do with it. I never saw any interest. I never found any value out of it because they were never teams that I really cared about. As someone who has seen it, how disappointed should I be?
You should be very. And you know what, Jack? I'm not even going to bullshit you. Like, watch this year's if you have the time for it. I know you're going to have a little human probably by then. They air in August, right? But you can even go back to past ones. Like the very first one that was ever aired was the Baltimore Ravens, 2001 or 2, something like that.
It's been around that long? I didn't even know.
It's been around forever, dude. I didn't realize it either. That's one that I actually went back and watched. When the news broke, well, we're talking like it's fucking, absolute breaking news. But when I saw the article, I was trying to think about what my very first Hard Knocks was, and I couldn't quite think of them, but I have like random memories of them. Like the very first, I think it was Baker's rookie year, and with the Browns, that was a really good one. And then the Rams had a couple that were like, okay, Jeff Fisher was blah, but like they had some good personalities. I know the Texans had one. They're a really fun series, man, and like to a point where you get to see a side of players, whether it's phony or not, but you just don't really see. These guys are mic'd up. They're having fun in training camp. They're having fun in practices. You get to know some of the guys. Like HBO, does a really good job of putting a spotlight on people because of, excruciating circumstances, or just like you sort of make you root for the underdog of an undrafted guy who's overperforming in camp, or like they do their thing. HBO is phenomenal at what they do. So when you told me that you'd never seen one, I thought you were joking. Like I legitimately thought you were fucking around.
No,
dude, they're such good watches, man. Like even like see, I watched last year's with Detroit, and before that one it had been a couple years. And I remember what maybe it was like a JJ Watt Texans one. But they are phenomenal, dude.
Is that what made you become such a big? Maybe if I'd watched that, maybe I would have bought into Dan Campbell a little bit more.
I don't think it made me buy into him any more than I liked him already. But it certainly didn't hurt. Like that's the thing is I don't think it's necessarily going to change anyone's mind on your perception of a team. I think it'll make you root for players that maybe you didn't know going into the year, or had maybe. Sometimes it's like they lost a family member and they're going through things and they're talking about it. It's like, you really want to root for people.
Okay. Can I say something that like maybe will make people a little bit cross, get a little cross with me. As the years have gone by, I don't know if it's an age thing. Man, I just don't give a shit about any of that storyline stuff. I don't find it interesting. I don't really find it all that compelling. Maybe it's just that COVID has made me so jaded in terms of like shit happens. Everybody in the world has kind of had to deal with shit, especially through COVID. Like after that, and maybe it's just me. I don't know if you feel any sort of similar, but like it's hard to feel like sympathy or like rooting for guys that are making the type of money that they're making. Like this, like people went through COVID, still struggling the same struggle they had before COVID. I don't know. It's just a different perspective for me. Maybe I'm completely off base, but I just that stuff just doesn't do it for me. Maybe that's why I've never really cared about Hard Knocks.
Well, no, maybe that was the wrong example to lead with. It's not only that. And sometimes it's like not even that in a whole season. But I'm just saying, like, give you a sort of look into the personal lives of some people throughout training camp.
I like the distance of it because I've seen clips. I have seen clips of the show where it's like when they do like cut days and things like that.
Yeah, tough shit.
That shit just makes me uncomfortable, and like to me that's not entertaining. To me, I get why some people would like it because it's a look into that world that you never really get exposed to. But to me, I don't like that stuff.
Let me get this right. You just went from right wing COVID, killed some people. Who gives a fuck? To it just makes me so uncomfortable to see people lose their jobs.
No, it's not
in the same breath, Jackie. What's going on here? Are you a fucking American-loving, flag waving, gun toting goddamn American, or are you a goddamn blue haired liberal who wants to fucking push agendas on our children?
I think I'm right in the middle, Frank. No, man. I listen. It's not that I'm uncaught. Like, I feel bad that the guy's losing his job. It's just like I just don't care, right? It is what it is, And I was looking, while we were talking, and it seems like the NFL is having just a problem in general finding a team to do Hard Knocks, which I find interesting. But they can force the Jets, Saints, Commanders, or Bears to do it. I mean, out of those 4 teams that I named, I would imagine the NFL is going to stay as far away from the Commanders as they possibly can when it comes to just overall talent, right? Like overall the ownership, the issues that they've had with the Washington franchise for a while now. The Saints could be an interesting option. Right, New Orleans. They've been a pretty successful organization, but I would say out of those 4 that I listed, I mean, it's got to be the Jets, right?
Jets like, and Bears are the 1 and 2, and you're hitting the enter button a few more times after that. I mean, with the hype and everything that's going around with Justin Fields, pretty much at every outlet, and then obviously the Aaron Rodgers thing, it writes itself.
I could imagine that the Bears maybe have some sway with the NFL. Is like, we really don't. It definitely does not strike me as something that George McCaskey would ever want to do willingly. Yep. Like as we've seen this Bears organization and how they operate, this type of exposure does not feel like something they would be willing to do, because it could put a spotlight on the way that they run things. It just opens them up to more criticism and ridicule from other fandoms who take shots at the Bears, rightfully so, as often as possible. But like the Jets just seems like it's easy money, right? You got the whole Rodgers stuff. You got the personalities with Sauce Gardner, with Garrett Wilson. They have an interesting team. They have a good, very good skill players on both sides of the football. Very complete team. And they got a guy in Robert Saleh who I think would probably, he's kind of in that realm of like Dan Campbell for me, where he could use some positive exposure kind of after everything went down. So I feel like out of those 4, the Jets would make the most sense for me. But I was kind of surprised that the Bears were kind of taken out of the running for all the reasons you just provided. Like they seem like an interesting team from an outside looking in.
I think the only con to it is where the Bears are at in their sort of rebuild, just in that stage of building the program. They are probably at least a year away from real contendership. And the one thing that this show does is it builds hype for your team. And maybe that's not something they want to place just yet on Justin and the rest of the guys, especially Eberflus hasn't really built, enough of a culture there. I could see from the Bears ownership standpoint, them saying like, let's hold off on this. But then the thing is, what if they make the playoffs next year, which who knows if they will, but I'm just saying like in a scenario, you sort of maybe miss that window to build a lot of hype if they're not a contender for next year's Hard Knocks.
I find 2 things really interesting. That first of all, that the NFL can just, I know they've been able to do this in the past, but like they're able to just like force a team to be able to grant access to like, because the NFL, as we know, Frank, is very secretive. Their teams love secrecy. It's just interesting to me that like they can't find a team willing to do it. A team that I think would make a lot of sense, and I'm kind of surprised isn't more willing to do it, are the Dolphins. Like, Mike McDaniel absolutely seems like someone who would be willing to do it.
Did they miss the playoffs last year?
They did not. They were in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, so it's only non-playoff teams.
Oh,
that qualify for it.
Dumb.
Yeah,
that's fucking dumb. Get your head out of your ass, NFL.
Yeah, I disagree with you, Jack, because I think, when you think
about the Raiders.
Yeah. They don't got much going on. They're not very interesting. But I think the reason that they do it, though, is, I mean, the NFL is the best at keeping small markets relevant throughout a full year. And this is just another one of those ways that they do that. So like imagine if it was, and it's at that point, it's not even about like the market size, because Kansas City isn't a big market. Pittsburgh isn't necessarily a big market. These are like winning teams. Boston is a solid size market, but it's not New York, right? Like it's gotten catapulted because they've won so much in our lifetime, but just the size of the market. But I guess what I'm saying is, it's good to keep or continue that hype and build that thing around teams who did not win last year
But it's interesting that teams don't want to do it.
It seems like more and more as the years go on, they're not open to it. And there has to be a reason why. And I don't know if anyone's ever actually come public and said, this is why we don't want to do it. They just decline.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of fascinating to me. I mean, if the Bears had been signed up, I wouldn't be like on this podcast ranting and raving about how this is going to ruin the season and how, everything's terrible. No. But I think it could have been kind of cool to get more of a look, and honestly, more a way for Bears fans to start building relationships with guys that we really still don't know a lot of these guys. We kind of have an idea of who they are as people, but
Jackie, I have no idea what DJ Moore's voice sounds like.
I imagine it's very, very like monotone, just kind of like is what it is. He just kind of talks. I don't know. That's kind of what I picture. But you're right. I have no clue what he sounds like. I know how Mitch sounds, because I've heard him talk a kabillion times.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, isn't it? I know how Justin talks. I know his voice.
Allen Robinson, very quiet.
Yep. I know how Tariq Cohen. Tariq Cohen was one that I knew.
Tariq Cohen, Akeem Hicks.
Akeem Hicks was interesting because he was like, if you just listen to him, like if he had a podcast, he could like put you to sleep with it. Not like, I'm not saying that in a negative way. He just had a calm, soothing voice.
Yeah.
But then he was just a monster on the field.
Yeah, just a crazy person who would only show up for Packers games, and that was about it.
Yeah. He was nuts. He just had that switch. He had the competitive switch.
Who was it? Who was it a couple years ago that was like the Packers killer? Was Leonard Floyd?
Oh yeah,
it was Leonard Floyd.
Oh
yeah.
He had at least one. Oh no, I'm thinking of Shea McClellan. He had a 3-sack game against them.
Shea McClellan ended Brett Favre's career, right?
No, it wasn't.
Oh
McClellan.
no, it was Corey Wooten.
Corey Wooten. Oh,
Corey Wooten.
Why was I gonna say Corey Otten? Is that a player now? Otten?
Cade Otten.
That's what I was thinking of.
Buccaneers.
Yeah. Wooten. Yep. Ended his career. Have you? I feel like I probably even told this story on the podcast, but for those who don't know, who listen, one of the funniest stories from Brett Favre, who is obviously a piece of shit now, but. Well, he probably always has been, but
I was going to say, I think he probably was always shit.
But he had talked about that play, and he was like so severely concussed that, I mean, he was on the floor for a while. Like, that was one of those ones where you thought he might have died. And he got up. I don't remember who it was. I think it was his running back that finally got him to wake up. And he was like, hey, why the hell is Brian Urlacher at our practice? Right? He thought they were practicing. He's like, why? And then he's like, and I kept looking around, and I saw like, I saw Pep and I saw this, and I was like, why are the Bears at our practice right now, man? They're stealing our plays. I forgot who the interview was with, and I may be even embellishing a little bit, but he was like, he thought the Bears were at their practice. It was really funny.
That's great.
It's kind of scary, but it was funny.
I kind of hope it happens to him more as the years go by. But Random Bear. You know what, Frank? Maybe this is what we'll do. Maybe we're going to introduce a new segment, and we're going to call it Random Bear of the Day. Because a name that just popped into my head that I will never think of again after this podcast.
All right.
Henry Melton.
Oh, defensive tackle, baby.
Melton.
I like Henry Melton, yeah.
I liked him too, number 96.
So now that you said that, the player that came into my head was another defensive tackle, Tank Johnson.
Yeah,
Guns
you know
blazing.
what? This might have to be a segment. Maybe we'll both come up with one.
Hey.
For every episode.
So really quick while we're here though, because this name may never pop up in my head again, and I have to say it because I'm not going to remember it next week. My first favorite Bear of all time, Jerry Azuma, baby, the original 23 kick returner, punt returner.
Yeah.
And Devin Hester came and stole his shine.
He was really good in Madden 2005 with Donovan McNabb.
Yeah,
Jerry Azuma
that was all that mattered in those games was speed. And he had like a 98 rating.
Yeah. I'm now looking. Oh, you know what? Okay. In like 3 years, Henry Melton had, doing some quick math here, I'm so bad at math. 15 and a half sacks.
He was a good player. I remember Henry Melton being a very good. I don't know if he was a 3 tech or a 1, but he was an interior guy.
Yeah, he was played left defensive. He started out as a D end and played left defensive tackle. Man, he retired after only 6 years in the NFL. That's pretty.
Damn. Did he play? He played with the Bears all 6?
He was with the Bears for 4 years, then went to Dallas, and then went to Tampa.
I faintly remember Dallas, but I feel like another defensive end of ours went to Dallas back in the day too. I don't know who. Was it Tank Johnson?
Only played his last season in Chicago was 2013, and he only played in 3 games.
Okay.
So they probably didn't pick up his 5th-year option and then just let him walk.
I can go, Jackie. We should honestly we should just freestyle an episode. It's not this one because we planned for it, but just to random Bears and what our memories are. Because another one that came into my head is R.W. McQuarters, cornerback, baby.
Wow. Yeah, that's a deep cut. That's a very deep cut. I liked
R-Dub. Didn't he win a ring with the Giants, or am I making that up? He went somewhere and won something.
Keep talking and I'll figure
another random Bear, Al Alfalava.
Yeah. You said yours. I'll give you mine. My favorite Bears player. I was actually split between 2. Yeah, my first favorite split between two of them. A-Train, simply because of the McDonald's bobblehead.
My boy.
And he was R.W. McQuarters was on the Giants in 2007 and 2008 and 2006.
And they won a ring in one of those, right?
Yeah, 2000. I don't know if it's considered 2007, but that would have been it. Yeah, he's a 1-time Super Bowl champ. So there you go. It was
the A-Train, and who was the second one?
A-Train, and then Muhsin Muhammad.
Oh, Moose.
Loved Moose.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Bernard Berrigan was my first favorite receiver.
Listen, there was quite a shortage. I guess there still technically is a shortage of Bears wide receivers to appreciate.
I mean, we had Alshon.
You think of teams like Washington, right? Like name 5 Washington wide receivers in our lifetime. I think I could.
Terry McLaurin.
Pierre
Garçon.
Santana Moss. He was always a mainstay.
Very good player.
Antoine Randall L.
Yeah, well, and then the other rookie that I have him in a bunch of dynasties. Why am I blanking on his name? Dotson. Jahan Dotson. That's my 5.
Name 5 more. like that's what I'm saying.
Jackie.
Like there's a few teams like the Dolphins, right? The Dolphins had Brian Hartline for a long time, and that was kind of it. Now they have 2 of the best wide receivers in the game, but the Bears don't have that. They only have. Yeah, they did have Brandon Marshall. That's right. For 2 years? 1 year?
At least 1. Maybe 2. They have Marty Booker.
Marty Booker. He was a former Bear as well.
Yep.
Yeah. The Bears just didn't have a lot of good ones, and they didn't really know how to use them either, because they didn't have a quarterback who could throw them the ball usually.
Yeah, it was. There was some tough.
Johnny Knox used to be the Bears' best wide receiver. That,
he would have been, if they knew how to build an offense, he would have been a really good number 2 guy to have. He was really fucking good.
I was gonna say I'd be curious to see how Johnny Knox played in today's NFL, with like the rule changes where you can't literally grab, you can't touch a guy. He had legit speed.
Listen, Jackie, speaking of Johnny Knox, I'm going to say something controversial here.
Go ahead.
Talent for talent, he was a better returner than Devin Hester was. I stand on that.
Wow.
Just talent-wise. Devin Hester's resume and what he did, he's the GOAT. But
okay,
just talent,
I don't know if I'll agree with you on that.
Johnny was a bad boy.
Yeah, but Devin is he's like one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. So,
yeah, but that's because of his resume, the things he's done, the touchdowns that he had. I'm just saying.
I'm
just talent-wise.
No, I disagree. I don't think it was just the touchdowns. I don't think it was just that made him the way that he could stop.
He coupled his elite talent with the production that he had.
Why could he catch punts and kickoffs, but he couldn't catch as a wide receiver?
That's a good question. I mean, a spiral is definitely different than the. You think it'd be easier?
Rotation.
You think it'd be easier to catch a spiral than it is to catch the? I mean, what do you call that? A tumbling.
He puts it right. He puts it right in the. Well, I guess how many people were putting it right on the dot.
Him and Jay got some good highlights together, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'll agree. I'd be curious. I'd be curious if anyone in our audience today, or whenever they listen to this, I guess, listens to that and says, "Finally, someone else." Finally, someone else said it.
There's at least one person in the Bears fandom that agrees with me.
I'd be curious to know if anybody agrees with me about how they don't give a shit about players' personal lives.
You shot that one off early too. Whoever staunchly disagrees with you is downvoting this video on YouTube.
And they're like, "Would you put the fucking headphone on your fucking other ear?"
Yeah.
It's getting impossible to see the virtual background.
In solidarity, oh, yours is behind.
Go behind.
Listen, here's solidarity.
Here's the thing. If I do it like this, I can't hear myself.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got open back. I got open back headphones.
Yeah, well, these are not that, because these are, just have. Listen, I'm sure there's a way I could make it fucking work. It's comfortable. Listen, this is how I did it at the Illinois Media School, where I trained to be a professional, and this is the way it's gonna fucking stay.
Listen,
because I like doing it.
I like it.
We've done over like a fucking 100 episodes of this shit, and I've had it the same fucking way the entire time. And because one video pops off for thousands of views. Now I get critiqued.
And you've been insecure ever since.
I have been. I'm getting called the guy on the right. I bring this podcast in every single fucking week. You remember my goddamn fucking name, not the whole thing.
Listen.
You don't need to remember the last name, but I say the same thing every single time.
Yep. David Kaplan could never.
Now that's something we can agree on. All right, no, Frankie. Let's get to enough reminiscing. Let's get to today. Let's be in the present. And let's talk about some Bears that are currently on the team, not guys that aren't and will never be again. Let's talk about some guys on this team who we think, 5 guys, who we think are the most critical to this season. 5 most important, and we're going to go 5 to 1. And I'm hoping that you and I have a couple of differences, though I think our number 1 will most likely be the same, probably as will everybody else who listens to this podcast. Frank, why don't you kick us off? Who's your number 5?
And before we get into this segment, speaking of 5 guys, this episode is sponsored by. No,
see, now that is a sponsor that
would have been 5 guys. If you're listening.
If you're listening,
we'll make a 5 guys list every fucking week. You just give us a little bit of money. We can be bought.
Damn right.
We can be bought.
Or the peanuts. I don't care.
I don't even know the 5. Let's just dive right into this, Jackie. Number 5 for me. Number 5 was tough. The other 4 were easier for me, and maybe you'll disagree with some of them on the list. But number 5 for me was Travis Gibson. The reason that he's number 5, and I don't plan to get too in depth with really any of these guys. I think some of it speaks for itself. But at this moment right now, I think the Bears, and this is something we've touched on, they have immensely improved that defensive line in regards to stopping the run. They've gotten Andrew Billings. They've gotten both the defensive tackles in the draft. They gotten DeMarcus Walker, who is a run stuffing. And they've already said they're going to kick him inside on passing downs. That's where he's better as a pass rusher, ironically. But otherwise, he's there to stop the run. So that leaves Travis Gibson as probably your number 1 pass rusher yet again, unless Dominique Robinson makes a splash or proceeds to move forward. But even then, Jack, how can anyone else move forward if Travis Gibson isn't the one that's attracting attention, that isn't the one that's making the plays to be accounted for? As much as I want Allen Williams to maybe blitz a little bit more this year, I would hope he didn't have to. I would hope that we can get an organic pass rush. You know what I mean? And that starts and ends as it stands right now with Travis Gibson. And again, that's assuming that the run defense is fixed. Let's just assume they can be, middle of the pack or better, because they were awful. They were even worse at that than they were with passing plays last year. So number 5 for me, Travis Gibson, because really I should have led with this, but this is the ultimate point: is this regime is showing immense faith in him yet again. They've yet to sign someone off the street. They didn't draft the pass rusher. It's still him. He's the guy, and he's been the guy since they traded Robert Quinn to not much, production avail. So, Jackie, any comments there? If so, delve in. If not, who was your number 5?
Yeah, I didn't have a pass. I didn't have a defensive lineman at all. So I'm glad you brought one up. Just because when I think of most important, right, I'm looking at positions of skill, their best groups, and I mean, it's hard to say that Travis Gibson is the most important when I don't even believe that he's really has a future with the Bears. Like maybe he becomes a rotational player, maybe he sticks around. I don't really know, but I don't think they see him as the future of the position. So, are we talking this year? Or are we talking down the road? For me, I get what you're saying, because if this team is going to win this year, he is going to be vitally important.
Yep.
It also puts a lot less pressure on the draft, on free agency next year, where you don't have to sign someone to a huge deal. You don't maybe need to even draft someone in the first round. Although I still think that they probably should next year. We'll get to that way down the road. Because then if you have a guy, right, that takes some of the pressure off. That was kind of what we were hoping to see this past year going into the season, because the list of needs was so long that if you can just find something on your defense, you can kind of cross something off. And they did. They found, right, Jack Sanborn was a nice little surprise. Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, Eddie Jackson, Jalen Johnson, all kind of seem to be hits, right? So that pushes the list of needs for those specific spots down. So that's kind of how I look at Travis. If he's good, great. If not, I won't be that surprised at this point. Based off of what we saw last year, my expectations for him are super low, right? I'm not expecting a big turnaround. And if he does, even better. If not, I already had kind of moved on from him overall. My number 5 is Jalen Johnson. And I feel like I don't need to go into a ton of detail as to why we talked about him a shit ton last week in regards to his potential contract extension. If you're interested in hearing our thoughts on if the Bears should move forward with that, go ahead and check out last week's episode. But again, the Bears still kind of need a star on their defense. And I think Jalen Johnson is probably the closest to being one. And given how young the secondary really is, with Kyler Gordon, with Tyreek Stevenson, with Terrell Smith, who they really, really like, Jalen Jones is another guy that kind of came out strong last year as well. Even Jaquan Brisker. Like, they need somebody to sort of be the leader of that secondary and someone just to be super productive and keep others from being productive as well on the opposite side. I think Jalen Jones is an incredibly important player, especially given the contract situation. They need to get that sorted out. We'll see how he plays, and maybe he plays himself into one.
I'm not mad at that. He did not make my list. I guess part of it is because I feel like I know what I have in him. And I look at this list of people who need to sort of step up, or maybe even someone who was new that's going to infuse something. But I'm not mad at that being your 5. Number 4 for me is a defensive player who, actually, Jack, we have a little bit of a disagreement here. You said that Jalen Johnson was probably the closest to being a star. I think my number 4, Tremaine Edmonds, is fits that mold just a little bit more.
Okay.
I know cornerback is becoming more of the premier position on defenses outside of pass rusher. But and maybe this is just the Bears bias in me, but I think back of what made this made the cover 2 successful here in Chicago. The engine that made it go was Brian Urlacher. And you look at the measurables, you look at what he can do in coverage, you look at his tackling ability, you look at his sideline-to-sideline speed. Now, I know there were years we didn't put it all together. I'm just talking about the physical traits. That's Tremaine Edmonds, man. Like, if you just sort of photoshopped 54 on him, he wouldn't look body type-wise and just, the way he can run much different than Brian did. And I think he was a little higher on the list from Travis because you hit the nail on the head. I isolated this year for number 5. It was like, who needs to step up for the Bears to be in playoff contention this year? As I went forward, it became more and more about the future. And for me, like, if he can, be the mic for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that's huge. You got the same play caller out there. You got the same guy reading offensive, making different adjustments as offenses are doing things pre-snap. And, you already hear them talk about his high IQ to be coupled with that athleticism. That is huge for this defense. Granted, We need these run. Again, that's also under the assumption, at least for the next couple of years, that they've stuffed that middle. I mean, we got some big boys on the interior now, so they can clog up holes for him to make plays, especially on those running downs. But for me, Jackie, not only is he important for this year, he's important for the remainder, for his whole contract, really. And then he's still young enough that he may play himself into another contract with the Bears by the end of it.
Yeah, I'm not mad about Tremaine being, potentially another star in that defense. They definitely signed him to be one.
Yep.
They definitely signed him to be a very important player. I just look at how the Bears kind of treated that linebacking position. They obviously put more emphasis on the interior of the line of the linebacking core, and of course in the middle of the defensive backs as well. I get what you're saying. I do. He's a rangy player. He's going to make a lot of adjustments. He's going to be, like you said, the engine that makes the whole defense run. And we'll see, because his coverage skills are going to be incredibly important. That's what they were asking Roquan to do, and that's why they just ended up feeling more comfortable moving on from him, because he just didn't have the coverage skills that they were really looking for. So I'm not mad about that. But when I think of importance, Frank, what we really like to talk on this podcast about the development of the offense being everything, especially as the Bears have kind of made this adjustment to being more of a present NFL team, being the team that's built more like a modern NFL team as opposed to what they just feel comfortable doing because it's just what they've always done. So I went offense for the next 4 picks for me. Cole Kmet was my number 4. And again, I don't think we really need to touch on him a ton because we talked about him last week as well. But same kind of deal. This offense needs stars, right? They have 2 supposed ones, or 2 that I think can be stars, and guys that I'm sure we'll bring up a little bit later. Don't want to spoil it. But Cole Kmet, we've talked about it, right? This tight end group is pretty thin. Next year, there's a good chance that none of these guys on the roster right now will even be here. So I think Cole Kmet has an opportunity and a chance to build on what he did last year as a career year and prove that he's a legit starting tight end and prove that he's a capable weapon and start living up to some of the hype that was surrounding him when he was coming out of the draft. So number 4 was Cole Kmet for me.
I don't hate it. He did not make my list. I should have prefaced my list in saying that I wanted to make sure that I did get a couple of defensive players, not even just because I wanted some diversity on the list, but because the defense was so fucking bad last year. Like an average defense, if the Bears had an average defense last year, they probably win like 7 games. There were so many one-score games where the defense just couldn't get a stop and the offense was humming. So I did want to make sure that, but I could have made a list full of all 5 offensive players because you're right. I think that is the priority, is to develop Justin Fields, and then also just how did you word that? It was perfect. Like just being a modern day offense that we've never, or we maybe only had like once or twice, and it was like one-off seasons in our lifetime.
Right.
But number 3 for me, and honestly, it could have been even my number 2. I sort of went back and forth, but it was Braxton Jones. You look at that offensive line. I am willing to, feel like the right side of the line is on lock for at least this year. Who knows what's going to happen with Nate Davis? I know he's a tad bit older, so you may dip into that well in the draft or whatnot and replace him in a year or two. But I really like. Why am I blanking on the rookie's name?
Darnell Wright.
Darnell Wright. Love him at right tackle. Center is I know that's very important, but we have 2 of them that we can cycle through if need be. I wanted to put names are evading me today, Jackie. Left guard. Tevin. I want to put Tevin Jenkins on the list, but he just doesn't seem to be as healthy, but Braxton Jones, all 17 games last year. He was in every single rep, every single snap. He was there. You think about what they want to do in developing Justin Fields, it starts with that left tackle. It starts with that blind side protection. He needs to get stronger. He needs his footwork seemed to be good, but it was more about the bull rushes and the strong arm and swim moves and things that he needs to get a little bit better at. But again, he could have really been my number 2, but we'll sort of talk about why he wasn't number 2 here in a minute. But he is, I think, the most important piece of that offensive line because as I was thinking about what offensive lineman, if not multiple, that I wanted to put on this list, who is the hardest to replace, right? Like Tevin Jenkins, if he gets hurt, you have Cody Whitehair that can kick out or kick to the left, and you have Lucas Patrick at center, or vice versa. Same
Larry
thing with
Borum is still around. Leatherwood.
That's what I mean. Larry Borum is there if need be at right tackle. If Braxton Jones or Darnell Wright gets hurt, like there's other, again, and they're not as good as these guys that I'm mentioning, but there are other things. I don't feel comfortable with anyone going to left tackle, even if it's Tevin Jenkins, and then you're kicking maybe Whitehair to left guard. Like, we need Braxton not only to take another step, but remain healthy, and move forward and be a better player than he was last year. So for me, Braxton Jones is third, and I could have not only had him higher, but I could have had a couple other offensive linemen on this list as well.
Yeah, my number 3 is Chase Claypool, and I picked him over Darnell Mooney, I should say, simply because Mooney has shown production recently, right? And I think he'll be fine. We've seen him up close and personal. I know that Chase Claypool has had some recent success as well as a rookie. Even the year after that, he was pretty solid. But if this offense is going to work, they're going to need a wide receiver to complement DJ Moore on the outside. And maybe Darnell Mooney is planning on playing more on the outside. Maybe he's not going to just be playing slot most of the time. Maybe they'll move some pieces around. Maybe Chase Claypool will play more in the slot than I think we realize. But I think Chase Claypool needs to justify that second round price tag that the Bears moved him for, or the Bears got him for, I should say. And I think I want to see why they felt it was so critical to get him on this roster, because that's for a team that's rebuilding. That's even with the second, even with 2 seconds, and that's why they made the move. That's why they made the decision they did. Why did they feel like it was worth that price tag to go and get this guy? I want to see it. I want to see how they plan on using him in this offense. Now that there's a guy, he doesn't need to be wide receiver 1 in this offense. That's DJ Moore, which I did not include DJ Moore on this list because I feel like it just speaks for itself. I wanted to talk about some other guys that probably aren't getting a whole lot of run, in terms of Bears conversations. And I feel like people have just kind of given up on Chase Claypool because they see the reports that the Bears are frustrated with him. They, things aren't going well. I think it's a little overblown. I'm sure it's frustrating that his injuries are sort of keeping him out from practice, missing valuable reps, things like that, going into, a potential contract extension year. We've talked a little bit about that as well. But he's still a talented player. Teams wanted him. It's not like Ryan Poles just gave a second to give a second. He gave a second because other teams were offering the same thing, and the Bears wanted him. And so I want to see how he fits into this offense. And I do think it's important that he produces well, because again, that gives you even more options for DJ Moore. It opens things up for him to be more effective. It opens things up for Darnell Mooney even more for him to be effective as well. So I think Chase Claypool is an extremely important player to this season if they're going to be good on offense.
I agree with every point that you made, but Chase Claypool did not make my list. So number 2 for me, and to be honest, we probably could have named any of the receivers to say any of the 3 at least, potentially even 4, with like Velas or the 4th round rookie that Tyler Scott. What? God, Jesus Christ, names today, Jack. I had a 3-day weekend and I was back at work today. I was
going to say, same here. Tuesday after a holiday. It's a rough day.
But number 2 for me was DJ Moore. I know he didn't make your list, but the reason why I was dead set on getting him on this list somewhere, and again, Braxton Jones could have been number 2, but the way that you've talked about Chase Claypool is that he has the opportunity to open the field a little bit more, because he should hypothetically be that intermediate and red zone threat, run crossing patterns, be the yak guy, sort of manufacture touches for him because he's good at that. I do hope they can maximize that skill set. But with DJ Moore, the reason why he was so important, he was such an important acquisition for Ryan Poles is that, and we touched on this, it knocks everyone else down the depth chart and sort of puts them where they need to be. DJ is the X, and then you can sort of battle it out as to who's the Y and who's the slot, and who's going to be coming in on 4 wide receiver sets and whatnot, which may change based on matchups week to week. But if DJ Moore isn't, the X that we think he is, that whole plan falters. That whole, if he's, and I don't think he is, I'm just saying that's why he made my list, because he can't just be another guy. He can't be the guy that we say, well, why the hell did we think going down the 9 was a good idea when we could have gotten so-and-so from the Texans, or we could have gotten this and that from whoever, or even like drafted a receiver earlier. You know what I mean? Like, we need him to be there, because if he's not that, it doesn't matter what Claypool or Mooney do. We know what they can do. We sort of saw their ceiling, whether it was with us or Pittsburgh. We need DJ to elevate everyone else. It's not only just for him. Even if his numbers aren't crazy, if he's commanding that level of attention from defenses, that opens it up for Cole Kmet, that opens it up for Darnell Mooney or Chase Claypool. His job for this year anyway is done. I would love for him to get 1,500 yards. But to me, you think about that wide receiver room, the buck stops with him, and that's why I had him at number 2. I certainly, won't argue not even having him on this list with the angle being like he's a dog already. You know what I mean? Like, we know what we got in him, and we can tell. I'm cool with that, but I just want to make sure I pointed out why he was on my list, because outside of injuries, you can never predict that. But like, if he just winds up being, which I don't think he will be. I'm just stressing the importance of why he's here. If he just winds up being another Chase Claypool type of acquisition, that wouldn't feel very good.
Yeah. All indications are that it's not going to happen. No. It's based off of what we've seen out of training camp. But the way that the Bears players have talked about him, I don't think they ever talked about Chase Claypool like that. Since he, agree, it's a different situation, different scenario. I get it, but no, I get having DJ Moore on the list for sure. Number 2 for me, I will go on the opposite side of the offensive line, and I'm going to say Darnell Wright. This is a guy that I was very excited the Bears drafted, especially towards the end of the draft process. I was convinced the Bears were going to take him, and I'm very happy that they did. Now he just needs to go out and prove that he is an anchor on the right side of that offensive line, because, listen, the Bears do not draft offensive tackles in the first round very often. And when they have in recent history, they haven't exactly worked out, unless you want to count Kyle Long. They drafted him he ended up playing right guard. Like, let's calm down a little bit. Darnell Wright needs to solidify that other spot. I think Braxton Jones is at 100%, totally agree with you. I could have easily put Braxton Jones at this spot. Left tackle, we understand its importance. But I don't think it should be understated how important the other side of that offensive line is, because that is where we saw a lot of issues last year with just the right tackle play. Riley Reif over there, it just wasn't getting it done. It just wasn't making the cut. It was making things even more difficult. And again, kind of going back to my comments on Jalen Johnson, if Darnell Wright is your anchor, if he's locked in at right tackle, you don't even have to think about it for 10 years. Good, because then you can start building in. If Tevin Jenkins isn't a fit at left guard, you can find someone else to play it. Nate Davis, you hope that he's just, that he's a solid right guard that you paid him to be, and then you'll figure out center at some point, once Cody Whitehair moves on eventually. But I think it should not be understated how important the right tackle spot is, especially with how much investment the Bears have done in that side of it. They spent their first overall pick on the right tackle. That should tell you a lot about how they feel about him and how they feel how important that position is as well. Because they could have just signed somebody and just said, okay, here you go, or just given Larry Borum or Alex Leatherwood another shot at right tackle. But they said, I want this guy. This guy's going to be the future of our, he's going to be the future right tackle for us. So I think that's an incredibly important position. We'll see if it pays off.
Yeah, no, and number 1 on
PJ Walker
really shouldn't be a surprise. It's PJ Walker, because I think the Bears will finally come to their senses and realize that Justin should be in the backfield, and you get a real quarterback in here. To
get rid of Khalil Herbert. Yeah, push Khalil Herbert out.
Yeah,
put Justin at RB1.
Exactly. No, obviously it's Justin Fields, and I mean this is your number 1 too, right? I think we can sort of popcorn style this. I think relating it back to DJ Moore though. The reason why he's number 1 is is clear. Like, he's the future of this team. The Bears' ceiling is his ceiling. If he doesn't wind up being that good, the Bears won't be that good. They're starting to build around him now. And that was part of the reason why DJ Moore shot up my list, is because this is the first time that he's in the NFL throwing to a legitimate X, a legitimate number one. So, with everyone's mind made up on that, if Justin doesn't have that great of a year, if DJ Moore doesn't have that great of a year, it's going to be Justin's fault, right? Like, no one's gonna say, oh, DJ Moore went there and stunk up. Like, I mean, unless he does, but I just don't forecast. He's done it with worse quarterbacks in Carolina. So I guess what I'm saying is you're starting to eliminate some of the excuses, albeit most were very legit. Offensive line play wasn't that good the last couple of years. Receivers weren't that good. Didn't have very many playmakers around him. So, you sort of saw him have to become Superman every now and then to make a crazy play. You're hoping to lessen that and him play a little bit more of a traditional role. I don't think you want to neuter him, but you want to make sure that you're surrounding him where he's not fucking having to run for 160 yards a game.
Right.
And that's why DJ Moore was number 2 for me, because these reports that are coming out, man, is, his timing already with DJ Moore, his ability to trust DJ Moore, I think goes back to what I was saying last year, combating some of the criticism of Justin of like, well, he doesn't know what NFL Open is. And it's like, yeah, but like, look at the real stats that show how little separation the Bears receivers are getting, and like how, like, who does he have to trust to make these throws? And you're already seeing this with a real threat to catch the ball in traffic in DJ Moore in OTAs. Like, that's a real thing. It does take trust for that to happen. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to throw an alley-oop to Steph Curry. You know what I mean? Like, he's probably not going to dunk that thing. It's versus even someone like a prime DeAndre Jordan, or you can just throw it at the rim, he'll dunk it for you. Like, obviously, weird analogy. It was the first thing that came to my mind. But Justin has that guy that he can trust now. And, again, I think we've talked about expectations, whether, overarching or very specific, but it's not even about stats. That is what I want to see this year. I want to see him trust his eyes more. I want to see that processor continue to speed up, that decision-making continue to speed up. And I do want to see him have that overarching trust in DJ Moore, where you're seeing the timing routes. You're seeing, like, I'm just throwing it to a spot because I know my guy is going to be there. Because to me, that shows you that has been there all along. It's been more about what's around him, right? Like, if we continue to see more and more of him not trusting, I think that's going to be more on him at this point, because you have a guy that you should be able to, trust your pre-snap read, which he's done really good. Like, you guys can go, like, I'm no quarterback guru, but you can go on these YouTube where these guys are breaking down these plays and showing you what Justin's doing pre-snap. Former coaches, former scouts. He knows what he's doing in that regard. He just hasn't trusted anyone in the past. And now you have him there. Justin is the number one. And last thing here, I know we said we popcorn. I sort of went off on a tangent. But he's also the reason why I could have just had all 5 offensive guys. Because this year, I don't think the Bears are going to make the playoffs. Or if they do, they may back in as a 7 seed or whatever. But this year is about him, again, taking another step. And how do you do that? You build around him. You continue to develop him. And everyone on your list is going to contribute to that, and except for maybe your number 5, and 3 out of my 5 are including himself, are going to contribute to that. So, like, this is yet another huge year in his development. One might argue this is the year of his development. Like, right. There may be some people, I don't know if I'm in that boat, but there may be some people who draw a conclusion after this year. There's no more excuses. You have your wide receiver room fleshed out. You have, hypothetically, a better offensive line. Go out there and prove it. Right.
Yeah, I part of me almost wanted to say screw your list and format and just say I didn't pick 5, I picked 1.
Yeah,
and it was Justin Fields, because it ultimately, if he is not good, none of this matters, right? It obviously doesn't matter if Tremaine Edmonds is the star that they signed him to be on defense, because that can only take you so far. Justin is the Bears, right? You said it perfectly. Like, they go as far as he goes in terms of his ceiling. It's so just weird to me how much emphasis people put on, like, stats, but only when it is used to, like, hurt or look negatively at certain people. Like Trevor Lawrence didn't have the greatest year in terms of quarterback stats. Like, he was good, but you kind of saw how having competent players around it, like the Jaguars built an offense around Trevor Lawrence because they had to. And there's always been this weird thing with the Bears and Justin Fields where it's like at a drop of a hat, the Bears could just move on from him and people would be like, good, like they should move on from, but like nobody's ever suggested that with like the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. And even Trey Lance gets kind of a pass with this as well, where it's just like the 49ers just wait until they get this. It's like, it's so weird to me that people are literally just looking at the passing stat instead of the overall team. And the Bears, I mean, fuck, man, you could even throw in the Jets and maybe the Patriots to a certain extent, and basically say, out of those 5 teams who drafted a quarterback in the first round of 2021, the Bears have consistently had the worst offensive group out of all 5 of those teams. And it's not particularly close, except maybe the Patriots, maybe. But even then, they have, I think, better players. Like Jacoby Myers would probably have been the Bears' best wide receiver.
Yeah, and Ramondre Stevenson is better than both Montgomery and Herbert. Agreed.
So now that, like you said, Justin has the team building around him, they have he's not learning a new offense like Jay Cutler was every single year. Mitch Trubisky, had some of that happen a little bit, and you think of how many, again, cooks were in that kitchen with Matt Nagy bringing in guys left and right to help get the offense fixed. It shouldn't be overlooked how consistency, how continuity will help Justin Fields' development. And I mean, it's not even close. This offense is the most talented he's had since he's been drafted from Ohio State. Like, these are the best players he's had to work with.
Yeah.
At about every level. So I totally agree with you. This is the opportunity to say, I am going to be a good quarterback in the NFL and establish himself as one of the stars of this league. Because I think you and I are kind of on that page where it's like, we really think he has the opportunity to do so. Like, I get the passing numbers were not great. You can say any excuse you want. The weapons weren't that good. The offense was still figuring it out. They didn't pass the ball all that much. There were like 4 games in a row where he threw it like 12 times. Like, of course it's not going to look that pretty, but you can't just discount the rushing skill set because it's a non-traditional quarterback stat. Like, he's still an elite rusher.
Yep.
So you combine that with better passing weapons, it's only going to elevate, or should only elevate, his play. So I agree with you. It's all about Justin Fields. If he sucks, none of the rest of this matters. If he's great, ultimately nothing else really matters because he'll be the one that's really elevating everybody else as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. If he's great, that elevates literally, at least on the offense, and that elevates, well, honestly, it can on the defense too. If you keep them off the field and sustain drives, and the holes that they still have aren't as prevalent, that helps them as well. But specifically on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, you can sort of pinpoint any little thing. If his decision making and trust in his receivers can be built up a little bit more, a missed block every now and then isn't going to be the worst thing because he can recognize, he can get the ball out of his hands a little bit faster. His pocket presence is something that has gotten way better, and if that continues to get better, that missed block, he's able to evade and maybe even stay in the pocket and not have to be forced to roll out every single time. Like, as he continues to improve, that elevates everything, and it makes everything look better. Even like mistakes, or even like broken plays, or even like timing plays. Like, as he gets better on all of these things, it's going to just continue to raise the floor of this team.
And it gives them the best chance to compete for a Super Bowl, because you see the best teams in the league are teams that have quarterbacks that are able to elevate the talent around them. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, like nobody else in that Chiefs offense, like running that Chiefs offense, could do what Patrick Mahomes does with the skill set that he has. Like, Joe Burrow has just incredible weapons to use, and he maximizes their talent. That's great. Josh Allen probably makes the Bills. better than ultimately what they should be, especially on offense.
Don't tell
Stephon Diggs might,
that.
he might disagree with me saying that. But you just look around the league, right? It's not some big secret. Like, you look at how Jalen Hurts was able to elevate the Eagles overall, and really, like, you said it a few times this offseason when we were talking about the DJ Moore acquisition, where people were like, yeah, well, he's not AJ Brown. And you were like, well, kind of look at it. He's probably better than AJ Brown was when he was in Tennessee comparatively. And people kind of, you're right. People kind of just forgot that he was good, but he wasn't one of the best wide receivers in the league.
It was the same with Diggs. Diggs was a wide receiver too behind Thielen at that point. And like, you saw the talent. It's not the downplay and like all of a sudden he just became this player. The route running was elite. The hands were elite. He was awesome. It's just he exploded when he became the number one guy with the better quarterback. Like, right.
And that's the point I was getting at. Yeah. Like, Jalen Hurts elevated AJ Brown into being what ultimately people thought he could be. Right. People were excited about him in Tennessee, but he didn't have the quarterback to really maximize his skill set. Hopefully Justin is that guy for DJ Moore. I'd love DJ Moore to be considered a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL by the end of this year. I think that'd be great. I think that'd be wonderful.
In terms of like real NFL lists, that will be tough. In terms of fantasy, and we'll have an episode about specifically about the Bears and fantasy at some point this offseason, but there's a real shot for him to be a top 5 fantasy receiver.
I agree. But that was our list of the top 5 Bears in terms of importance for this upcoming season, a little bit beyond as well. We're curious, of course, as always, to know what you guys think. Maybe you guys had some other players, maybe Kyler Gordon, maybe Jaquan Brisker. Maybe you think he's a potential star. Maybe one of the running backs. We didn't really touch on a lot of the running backs. That's just how Frank and I typically feel about running backs in general.
Preston Ebner is my number 5.
Man, yeah, that one. I know that one hurts. That one stings a little bit for you after last year. But we'll see. Maybe he turns it around. He
won't.
He probably not, but we'll have to wait and see. Well, we appreciate you guys, as always, for listening to this edition of the Bear with Us podcast. Not the Bears with Us.
The Bears could be with us.
I wish they were. Maybe we'll get one on one of these days. Should. Frankie, as always, it's great talking with you. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.